I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East. The whole world must be cleansed of the evil from which half the world has been freed.
Hey guys, welcome to my new channel. My name's Justice and I'm an indie director, producer, and content creator. I've been experimenting with YouTube for around 7 years. Done some gaming channels, commentary, making little edits on my phone when I was 14, but I never really got the chance to put my film knowledge and experience on the internet. So when I was coming up with this channel, the themes, and my first video idea, I thought, what better for me personally than to start off with the first Godzilla movie. Godzilla was always a huge influence on me as a kid. I had the t-shirts, played the video games, watched every movie, yes, all 39 of them, and to be honest, it's actually what got me into the film industry in the first place. I always wanted to make a Godzilla movie when I was a kid, and eventually, that just got me into film. Started learning the techniques, practicing on my own, went to college for it, and it brought this industry into my life. So, I kinda owe it to Godzilla. Technically speaking, he showed me what I wanted to do with my life, my career. So, in commemoration of the new Godzilla movie, Godzilla Minus One, and his 69th anniversary, we're gonna cover the 5 dubs of Godzilla 1954. So what is Godzilla 1954, or the authentic Japanese title, Gojira? The name Gojira actually comes from the 2 Japanese words for gorilla, monkey, and whale. Gorira and Kujira, which combined comes to Gojira, and translated into English, Godzilla. I also did hear a rumor that it was a nickname given to this big guy that used to work at the studio. So if you guys know which one is 100% the authentic reason, let me know. By the way, moving forward, I'm going to be referring to the film as Gojira and Godzilla as himself, just so there's no confusion. So Gojira came out in 1954 and was directed by Shiro Honda and produced by the now famous Toho Studios. Toho Studios was founded in 1932. A whopping 91 years ago, and is still making movies to this day. Their first film was called Three Sisters with Maiden Hearts and was released in 1935. But it would almost take them 20 years to make their first kaiju movie and their breakout star, Gojira. The term kaiju in Japanese means giant monster, and is usually the term used when describing the giant monster movie genre. Gojira wasn't the first kaiju movie though. Many came before and it even inspired it as well. There was The Lost World from 1925, the original classic, King Kong.
Fucking crazy 800-pound silverback bursting through the trees.
From 1933, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms of 1953. You can definitely see the inspiration here with being a big lizard and all. And a movie that came out in 1954 as well called Them, which is about big ants.
I'm Ant-Man.
A lot of ants.
Gojira actually had 2 separate releases. One in Japan in 1954 titled Gojira, and one in the US titled Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which came out 2 years later in 1956. I always found it kind of funny that Godzilla's now famous title as King of the Monsters didn't come from the Japanese who made him, but the Americans?
Godzilla is American.
He's king of the monsters, and we love him. He votes for me. He's our president.
So the two versions are very similar and follow the same plot, with the key difference being the perspective that we follow the story from. Now, the Japanese version follows the plot like any traditional movie. You follow the characters and the plot and discover things as they do. This is a first-person perspective. Now, the American version is different this way. You see, at the time back in the 50s, there was this really popular actor in the US named Raymond Burr. And after the US saw the potential and success of the film in Japan, they cast him in their own version of the movie as a narrator type character.
I can hardly believe what has just happened. Now it seems Tokyo has no defense.
How the US made this version different from the Japanese is they shot a whole bunch of new scenes that connect with the originals. They hired Japanese American actors to translate some of the scenes that were originally in Japanese, and Raymond follows all of our traditional characters just in the background. They even used some light trickery with the shots by shooting Raymond talking to our main characters, but without showing their face, just for ADR to go over instead.
You take this monster talk seriously?
Who can tell?
This version of the movie also kind of seems like it doesn't really know what it wants to be. For some reason, the original actors are dubbed over, but some other times when you actually need to hear what they're saying and the plot calls for it, they leave it in Japanese. There's even a scene where they're discussing what happened during Godzilla's first attack, something very important to the plot, but they just leave it in Japanese with no subtitles. And Raymond just says,
I'm afraid my Japanese is a little rusty.
Is this nigga serious?
I do understand that this is how it was for the time. American audiences knew little to nothing about Japanese culture, so having this American character come from an outside perspective, I guess gave them something to latch on to. But still, not really my thing. I feel like it just takes you out of the movie. It's because that you're watching the movie from a third-person perspective. You don't feel like you're with the original characters along this horrifying experience. It feels like you're watching a documentary on how a nuclear god destroys Japan. So if you're watching this movie for the first time, and you know nothing about Japanese culture, Godzilla, or the 50s back then the American version's probably for you.
Godzilla hates walls.
But if you want the authentic film watching experience where you actually follow the characters and follow the plot and feel the emotion of the scenes, then the Japanese version is way superior. Something else I really enjoy about this movie is its pacing and length. Both versions come out to be around an hour and a half, and they just jump right into the plot. No filler, no stupid backstories. You're in the movie, you're along the ride. We begin on a steam vessel out in the Japanese Sea. Everyone on board is just chilling, vibing out. They're munching food, playing tunes, having the time of their life. Suddenly, when they look overboard, there's a flash of light and a large boom that erupts from the water. The light blinds the crew and sends them into a panic. The ship is then set ablaze and destroyed, never showing the perpetrator. Shortly after, the Coast Guard is alerted of the missing ships, and we are introduced to our two main characters, Hidito and Amiko. Hidito works for the Coast Guard, so he's alerted of the incident and gets called into work. These two characters are established as a couple, but they don't go into any unnecessary romantic subplot. They're two characters, they love each other, they live together, but that's all you really need to know. The Coast Guard is confused on how the ship could suddenly just explode and disappear, and more ships are sent out to investigate. These ships are promptly destroyed by the strange flash of light. Back on shore, the families and friends of the crews grow restless as to what happened to both ships. I do like that they actually show how Godzilla's attacks are affecting people on a human level. It's dreadful that the people dying have families at home that actually care about them. It makes the plot more impactful and relatable. The newspapers then show that the running theory is that a sea mine or volcano caused the explosions. I do like that in this point of the movie, we don't know that it's Godzilla yet, and that the mystery of this thing randomly killing people adds to the sense of dread and fear in the audience. We don't know its intentions or what it's even capable of. Hell, we don't even know what it looks like, which makes it horrifying. We are introduced to the people of Odo Island shortly after, where a lone survivor of one of the crashes is recovered out of the sea. The survivor claims that he did it, personifying the disasters for the first time. When asked who he is, he only says, "A monster." Spooky. We then show a different part of Odo Island where some fishermen come up with no fish. And for the first time in the film, an old man exclaims that the culprit must be their god and legend, Godzilla. After the Coast Guard arrives to investigate, the people of Odo Island take part in a ritual to fend off Godzilla. Establishing Godzilla as a deity and not just some monster adds weight to his character and his presence in the film. Later in the night, as everyone gets to bed, a massive hurricane-like storm hits the island. Floods, heavy winds, and thunder shake the houses of the small village. But as we focus in on one of them, booming footsteps wake up the family. I'd just like to make a note here that the sound design in this film, especially for the time, is amazing. Every step he takes sounds like a bomb going off, which I know was intentional. I also like that Godzilla comes with the storm, almost like he summoned it himself. This also goes along the lines with him being some type of deity or a force of nature.
Now I am become death.
As the footsteps get louder, one of our characters leaves the house in fear. Shortly after, we see Godzilla's foot for the first time crushing the house. I'd like to make a note here as well at the acting in this scene. The fear that the actor displays when watching his brother being crushed under rubble really sells the helplessness, the powerlessness that he must feel. It makes you feel hopeless, like there's no escape. After the attack, we go to a court hearing where the witnesses testify about what happened. They then go back to the island with the research team and discover one of Godzilla's footprints. As the doctor continues to investigate, he discovers that the footprints are radioactive. Interrupting their investigation, Godzilla's booming footsteps echo throughout the valley. They all rush up the hill to investigate, and for the first time in film history, Godzilla is shown to the world. Now, Godzilla's design in this film is a bit jarring.
Hello there.
His eyes are a bit off and his face looks very contorted and uneven, but when you think about it, he was mutated by radiation. He's not supposed to look cool and badass like the later incarnations. He's supposed to look scary and nightmarish. I also think this scene is very effective because we don't see a lot of Godzilla in it. We show him for a brief second roaring and him looking over the hill. But for majority of the scene, we only see people's reaction to him. This is a classic horror movie trope, letting your imagination scare you more than your eyes. We fear the unknown the most if we only get a glimpse of the horror.
Your folks will get kind of worried.
And I know, this isn't scary nowadays, but think about it for the time. Imagine seeing monster movies like this, not understanding how they made them back in the 50s. This would probably scare you too. Speaking of abnormal filmmaking, you'd never believe on how they actually made Godzilla's iconic roar. At first they tried a mix of animals like lions and bears,
Bear dabbing.
but the sound effect just wasn't right. So what they ended up doing is taking a rubber glove, coating it in pine tar, and then rubbing it on a double bass.
Are you serious?
After the hill scene, Godzilla leaves back into the ocean and the humans regroup back at the conference room. This is where we first discovered that the radiation found in Godzilla's footsteps are from a hydrogen bomb. This revelation sends the conference into an uproar, and this origin story of Godzilla's leads into the metaphor he is today.
The destroyer of worlds.
The military then decides to use depth charges to try and fend off Godzilla and make him migrate away. Obviously, that doesn't work, and he soon shows up in Tokyo Bay. After running out of options, the military turned to a scientist for help, Dr. Serizawa. Amiko goes to recruit him to help fight against Godzilla. When she arrives at his laboratory, he shows her the device he's been working on, the Oxygen Destroyer. The Oxygen Destroyer would later become notorious in the series for being one of the only weapons that can actually stop Godzilla. I do love in the scene where we're shown it for the first time, it doesn't actually show what it does. Similar to Godzilla's introduction, it only shows the fear and terror that it causes. This shows us that Godzilla isn't the only horror in this movie. Dr. Serizawa in this film acts as a Oppenheimer-like character. He creates a weapon so destructive that not even he wants to see it used. The design of the Oxygen Destroyer at the center looks identical to the plutonium cores used in Little Boy and Fat Man, the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the end of the scene, Dr. Serizawa asks Samiko to keep the weapon a secret in order for it not to fall into the wrong hands, and she obliges. Shortly after, Godzilla rises into Tokyo Bay. Why are they even shooting at him? Just looks like he's having fun in the pool or something. So, Godzilla gets pissed for ruining his pool party, so he goes on land and we finally get Godzilla attacking the city. Yeah, this is what we came here for, it's the classic. Yeah, the human stuff is interesting, but everyone knows why you're here. To see Godzilla wrecking shit up.
Yeah, boy.
He flips a bridge, stubs his toe, and the funniest part is, he kinda just leaves.
I'm a fault with.
This is also the first time where we establish Godzilla's biggest beef in history. Trains. Now, hear me out. Godzilla hates trains. Anytime there's a train in his movie, he goes out of his way just to get it. He's f***ing them up. Sometimes they're f***ing him up. This beef's been going on for decades. So the military's pissed off that Godzilla just shit on their city, so they all come up with an intricate plan on how to take him down. Guns. There is an electrical fence, but mostly guns. And as the military rallies together, we finally hear the classic theme song. I haven't mentioned this in the video up until now, but Godzilla's soundtracks composed by Akira Ifukube, the GOAT himself, are masterpieces. They've still used these soundtracks up until this day because they're just that good. They perfectly encapsulate the atmosphere of what's going on and the tragedy or the battle of what's happening on screen. And when Godzilla marches on screen with that music, it's just... Yeah. So, RIP to the GOAT, but thank you for blessing our ears for all these decades. So Godzilla comes back up onto land after resurfacing in Tokyo Bay, and he's ready to go. He's not on no stubborn toes or anything like that, he just wants to wreak havoc and cause carnage. He walks up to the electrical wires and the military just starts blasting, shooting him with everything they got. He's being electrocuted, blown up, but it's nothing to him.
Come on, man! That's too easy!
It's also the scene where he uses his atomic breath for the first time on screen, which for the 50s is still a very cool effect and works for the movie. Godzilla continues into the city and just destroys everything he sees. People, cars, buildings, anything in his way is just getting lit up. It's honestly terrifying watching this unstoppable deity just have its way with a helpless city and its civilians. So how did they do all these cool effects? So, as you may know, back in the day, Godzilla was portrayed by a guy in a rubber suit. The little known fact is that it was actually a horrible experience to be this guy acting as Godzilla. A whole cup of sweat was drained out of the suit after a couple takes because it weighed 200 pounds. There was even a couple times where the actor inside passed out due to heat exhaustion. Later incarnations would change this to prevent the problem of, I don't know, killing your actor, but still, doesn't sound so fun to play Godzilla now, does it? Most monster movies before this used stop motion to portray their monsters, but what Toho did here is something called suitmation. This filmmaking technique is shooting your subject from low angles and a slowed camera speed, and surrounding them with detailed miniatures. They often only shoot parts of Godzilla's body during the scenes, or superimpose him with other people running away in the foreground. Again, for the 50s, these effects worked very well and would later be perfected over 50 years. Just because I'm a massive Godzilla fan doesn't mean I'm not open to criticism though. Some of the stop motion shots that are in the movie take you out of it quite a bit and turn out to be more hilarious than anything else. There are also some wider shots and some close-ups that use a puppet to portray Godzilla, where it's very clear that someone is just using their hands. Seems like him and Kermit would get along though.
You son of a bitch!
During Godzilla's rampage, there's a pause in the scene where a mother holds her children, explaining that they will soon see their dead father. It's a very dark and disturbing moment, and I'm surprised to see it in a Godzilla movie. But that's what this Godzilla movie is about. It's dreadful, horrifying. Here's another quick fact for you. When Godzilla destroys the Tokyo theater, people watching the movie in real life back in the day at that same theater ran out in terror because they believed that Godzilla was actually outside coming to get them. It's stories like that that really show you the power of filmmaking. Godzilla decimates Tokyo, leaving it in rubble and ash. The shots shown here of the destroyed city are empty and depressing. They show a hospital full of orphaned children crying at their dead parents, and injured souls shell-shocked by the destruction. This imagery is extremely important for what this movie is actually about, and what Godzilla actually represents. Our characters are now desperate. They know that Godzilla must be stopped by any means necessary, so they turn to the one person that may be able to stop him, Dr. Serizawa. Our main duo go to him and plead to use his weapon to stop Godzilla, but he refuses, knowing what unleashing a power like this could do to humanity. Once again, paralleling Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb. In the US version, this tense scene ironically has the funniest line in the movie.
Steve Martin and Ogata, they both agree. You must use your oxygen destroyer against Godzilla.
No.
No. No.
No! No! No!
We must have the formula. We must. Let's go.
Please stop.
After the tussle, Serizawa sits down and debates whether he should use the oxygen destroyer or not. This is cross-cut with a choir of children singing a very somber song. At first this seems odd, but I see it as us peering into Serizawa's mind. The conflict of how many people are dying now, but how many might die later to his device. I also see this as him coming to terms with his fate at the end of the movie, and the decision he must make. He eventually comes around and agrees to their terms on one condition, that the oxygen destroyer must never be used again. He burns the blueprints and they set off to sea to find Godzilla. They send down some divers to locate Godzilla and they find him just casually taking a nap. Jeez, man, they're always bothering Godzilla when he's not doing anything wrong. First the pool, now he's just trying to get some hours before his shift in the morning. Attention to detail here. I love that they added fish in front of Godzilla's body to really sell the fact that they're underwater. Underwater scenes are hard to shoot in movies, especially in the 50s, and with a guy in a rubber suit, so props to them. Also, the music throughout this whole scene is very somber, going off the choir from earlier. This isn't a victory or a triumph. This entire event is a tragedy. No one should be feeling happy at the end of all this. Serizawa gets into range of Godzilla and cuts his line. He knows what he has to do. He activates the oxygen destroyer, sacrificing himself to kill Godzilla, and to ensure that his work will never be used for death ever again. Godzilla surfaces one last time and lets out one final cry of pain before being turned to bone and then to ash. Watching Godzilla die like that, even as a kid, was always pretty sad to me. They don't portray his death like slaying a dragon or vanquishing a monster. It's like an animal being murdered. It really made me ponder the question on who Godzilla is. Throughout the film, we see Godzilla and he definitely is the center of attention, but it's only hinted at to what his true intentions actually are, and who he is as a character. A common misconception of Godzilla is that he's just some dinosaur, some animal that only goes off his instinctive nature. But this is completely false and is even proven in this movie. The first time we're introduced to Godzilla is as a deity, a god, not an animal, but something with consciousness and thought and can relatively be reasoned with through sacrifice. In later incarnations, this is explored upon more, but even in this first movie, it's very well established that he does have emotions, even a soul. He shows pain, anger, fear. These are all things that you and I feel as well. The whole reason why Godzilla is even around in this movie is because of the nuclear testing and the horrible mutation he's received by the radiation. Although he does cause destruction and kills thousands of people in this film, Godzilla is the victim. It may not seem like it at first, but if you really think about it, it's true. Godzilla is awoken from his own environment by a man-made device into a world he does not recognize. Living in constant pain due to his mutation, the only emotion he's forced to put upon humanity is vengeance. He goes out of his way to destroy things. He goes out of his way to kill people. This is not just some animal who walked on the land and stumbled around. He's angry and in pain and only seeks to stop that pain by obliterating what caused it in the first place. A comparison I like to make that I've never heard anybody do is that Godzilla is Frankenstein's monster. The main reason why both monsters get hostile is because they never asked to be made, but are still treated as if their existence is their fault. If someone creates a being and treats it like a monster when it never asked to exist in the first place, where else would its destiny lead? Quote, Godzilla is a warning to every one of us. When mankind falls into conflict with nature, monsters are born. End quote. But what does this all mean? What are the undertones and themes of this movie trying to tell you? Well, that goes back to where and when this movie was made. Back in 1954, Japan was still recovering from the end of World War II, which had ended just under a decade earlier. Its relations with the rest of the world were still rebuilding, and its people forever scarred by the atomic bomb. You see, the end of World War II didn't end with Nazi Germany surrendering. Most people remember it ending on August 6th and August 9th of 1945, with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Little Boy and Fat Man were the first and only atomic bombs ever used on a civilian populace. Although a fraction of the power to the weapons we have today, they were still horrifyingly devastating. Over 100,000 people died to these two devices, either on impact or slowly over time due to radiation. And this world-changing event is why this movie was made. Godzilla is a metaphor for the horrors, abuse, and atrocities of war and atomic weaponry. After the events of 1945, Japan could never forget their nightmares, so they looked to personify it into something that everyone could understand. An unstoppable force of nature, created by man, unleashed on the world. Godzilla's design reflects his metaphorical persona. His charcoal skin is burned and rough. This is in reference to the radiation scars that survivors had after the atomic bombs. His mutated face and head shape was supposed to resemble a mushroom cloud. And of course, his atomic ray is pure radiation. When Godzilla annihilates Tokyo, the imagery of the city on fire parallels directly with the Tokyo fire bombings and what the city looked like back in March of 1945. And this is why Godzilla was such a phenomenon. It wasn't because he was a monster or he was scary. It was because he actually meant something. Not just to a couple fans or a couple filmmakers, but to a nation, to its people, to the world. My favorite thing about Godzilla is that the theme of the movie is walking around. It's not hiding behind dialogue, writing, composition, or color theory. No. The reason for the story, the lesson you're trying to teach, the message you're trying to send to the world is actually a being, a deity, a god. Overall, Godzilla in 1954 is a masterpiece of film for the time and forever. Is it perfect? No, of course not. Every movie has its issues, and this one is no different. But the impact it had on the rest of the world and for Japan as a country cannot be overlooked. So on a critical level, I give it a 9 out of 10. And for Godzilla, the original, the OG, as a character, 10 out of 10. I iconic, powerful, and immortalized in our culture from now until the end of time. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. If you like this, make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to comment any suggestions for future episodes. Thanks once again, and have a good one.